Hi everyone, I am back to give you another Bible story this week. It's been a few weeks since we've been together, but this is a really important stuff that we're going to talk about today, and so I've asked the Lord to help me to tell you these things in a way that you can understand. We're coming to what is, in a way, the end of the story of Jesus. It's not really the end, but it looks like the end. Uh, we're coming down to the stories of the death of Jesus and all the things that happened to him at the end of his life. Now, what I want you to understand is that the things that happened to Jesus at the end, they were not a surprise to him. He knew all about them, he expected it. And not only was it not a surprise to him, but he was completely in control of all the things that were going on. And this may be a surprise to you because when people come and grab somebody and haul him off and treat him badly and even kill him, it sure seems like he's not in control of the situation, right? But these other bad people, right, have come around and taken control and are making something bad happen where Jesus had intended something good, right? But that's actually not the way to understand this. I want you to see, as we tell the story today, that Jesus is completely in control, and nobody is doing anything to him that surprises him or that he isn't allowing to happen. Okay, so now all along, as Jesus was spending time with his disciples, traveling from place to place, there was a point, kind of halfway through that time of teaching and doing miracles, where Jesus started to talk more and more about what would be the end of his life. So he would tell them things like this. He would say, this is from Luke chapter 9, he would say, the Son of Man, that's a way that he talked about himself. He said, the Son of Man, I must suffer many things and be rejected by the leaders of the people and be killed. And on the third day, be raised from the dead. And then he would say again, a little later, he said, let these words sink into your ears. I am about to be delivered into the hands of men, right? Other people are going to come and take me, and they're going to do to me what they want to do. And I want you to know this ahead of time. He kept telling them this. But they didn't understand. They didn't know what he was talking about. They didn't like it when he said things like that. And they were afraid. But Jesus continued to go toward Jerusalem. At the end of his life, he was on a journey to go to the city for the Passover, knowing full well what would happen to him when he got there. And he could have said, I'm not going to Jerusalem. He could have turned around and gone the other way. But he didn't. He continued to go step by step toward the things that were going to happen to him there. Now, last week, if you were in Sunday school at church, you heard the story about the Last Supper, when Jesus had dinner with his disciples on that Thursday night. Afterward, they went out into the dark, all of them except for Judas, who had kind of gone off by himself. And you'll see why in a minute. But the rest of them went out in the dark, and they went to the place that was a familiar place to them that seems like they may have often kind of camped out at when they were in Jerusalem. Kind of a garden outside the city. It was a place that they could camp. Now, Judas knew this place, and Jesus knew that Judas was planning to bring the guards of the people to arrest him. But Jesus did not hide. He could have said, well, you know what, I think tonight we're going to go somewhere different, somewhere that Judas doesn't know. I'm going to go to a completely different place. Maybe I'll leave town altogether and forget about all of this. But Jesus did not hide. Jesus did what was predictable. He went to the place that he always went, the place that Judas knew and where Judas could find him. And that was this place called the Garden of Gethsemane. Now, they got there, and it says, Jesus began to be sorrowful and troubled. He said, my soul is very sorrowful, even to death. So this is something now, right? He's in control. He knows what's going to happen, but he is very sad. He's very troubled. He's very kind of heavy. I think you can almost say that he's afraid. It's overwhelming to him to think about what is going to happen to him. What it's going to be like to die on the cross, and really more than just to die on the cross, but to have a distance between him and his Father, to be rejected by his Father, abandoned by his Father, and how terrible this is going to be. And so he was so troubled and sad that in the garden he began to pray. And the way he prayed was this. He said, Father, if it is possible, let this not happen this way. If it's possible, let this pass from me so that I don't have to go through it. But I want to obey you. I want to fulfill your plan. And then a second time he prayed the same way. If it is possible, please let me not have to suffer this way. It was so horrible to know what was coming that he asked God, is there some other way we can do this? And part of what that shows you is, again, he knows what's coming. And he's not looking forward to it. He doesn't want to have to suffer in this way, but he's ready to do it anyway, and we'll talk about why. Now, after a time, it was getting late at night, and the disciples had fallen asleep, and Jesus was kind of by himself in the garden, just very sad and heavy, when they came. A crowd of men with swords and clubs, like heavy sticks that they could use to hit people with. And in the dark, this crowd of men with weapons came out, and they were carrying torches, right? So a stick with fire on top, and this was how they could light their way, with these torches. And they came through the dark. You could see the flickering fire, and these men looking angry and serious with their swords drawn. And in the middle of them was Judas. Now, he had led them to that place so that they could find him at night and arrest him in private when the crowds wouldn't know about it. And in the dark, Judas needed to show them, this is the one, because it was dark, and he needed to make it clear, this is the one. And he went over to Jesus and he said, "Hello, teacher." And he gave him a kiss on the cheek. And then they came, and they took a hold of him. And the disciples were waking up and seeing what was going on. And Peter had a little sword. And he jumped up and he pulled his sword out and he swung it and he cut off one of these guys' ears. He just sliced it right off. And Jesus said, "Put your sword away." And Jesus touched the man and kind of healed him, and kind of returned the ear to his head. Because Jesus was not saying, we're going to fight so that I don't have to go. We're going to fight these guys. He didn't want to fight. He didn't want to make a fuss and be unwilling to go. He was ready to go. He said, "Put your sword away. We're going to go and do the things that I'm going to go and do the things that my Father has given me to do." And he said, "Don't you think that I couldn't cry out to God and he would send 12 legions of angels," which means a lot, like hundreds, thousands of angels. "Don't you think that I could call out to God and lots of angels would come and defend me if I wanted to, but I'm not going to do that?" And the disciples were scared and they were confused and they ran away into the dark, and they left Jesus by himself with these guards who grabbed him and dragged him off. Now there were two trials that Jesus had overnight. There was first the trial in front of the Jewish leaders, and then the second trial was in front of the Roman leaders. And the first one, he was brought in to kind of a meeting room in the temple late at night, and the leaders of the people had gathered, and they began to ask him questions. And different people would come up and tell lies about Jesus and say, well, he did this, he said that. And they were trying to make a case for why Jesus was guilty and should be killed. And it says many false witnesses came forward and said these different things that weren't true. And now, do you know what Jesus could have done? He could have said, "No, I didn't say that. What I said was this, and this is what I meant." Or he could have said, "No, I didn't do that. He's lying." He didn't do that. It says that Jesus remained silent. And that the high priest was kind of confused by it. Why isn't he trying to defend himself? And he said, "Don't you have any answer to give? What is it that these guys are saying? Don't you have any answer?" And Jesus was quiet until finally the high priest said, "Look, I'm asking you this question, and I telling you to answer. If you are the Messiah, if you are the Son of God, tell us plainly." And Jesus said, "That's right. What you said is right." And the high priest was so angry and frustrated, it says he tore his robes and he said, "Well, we don't need to hear anything else. That's enough. This is blasphemy, something that he said about God that nobody should say." And he turned to everybody in the room and said, "Well, what do you say about it?" And they said, "He deserves to die." And they spit in his face, and they slapped him, and they pushed him around, and they sent him off to the Romans for trial number 2, which we'll talk about next time. But guys, what I want you to see, what I've been saying here, none of this was a surprise to Jesus, and he was completely in control. He didn't resist in the garden. He didn't resist in the courtroom. He went along with it. He let it happen. And all the ways that he could have resisted, he chose not to. In the Gospel of John, Jesus says something really important. He says, "Nobody takes my life from me, but I lay it down by my own decision." Right? Nobody takes my life from me. I lay it down by my own decision. Why would he do that? Well, the answer is in another place in the Gospel of John, where Jesus says, "Greater love has no man than this." Right? This is the biggest expression of love ever by anybody. Greater love has no man than this, that he laid down his life for his friends. Jesus chose by his own decision to lay down his life. Why? To save his friends. And by that he meant not just Peter and James and John and Mary and Martha and people like that. He meant you and me. If we put our trust in him, if we follow him as our Lord and Savior, he means us. He means us, that he lays down his life for you and for me, that we could live with him forever. It's amazing. It's amazing what Jesus would do. That's all for today. I think that's enough. Think about these things. Roll them around in your head a little bit. Talk about them with mom and dad. This is really important stuff. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.